Hello, everybody, and welcome back to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy podcast. My name is Charles, and with me today, as always, is my lifelong friend and co-host, Dylan.
Ready to talk some fantasy with my friends, Charles.
Yes, we say friends today because today we are excited to welcome Adam Bassett. Adam is an author of Digital Extremities, his upcoming release, and he's the UX and UI designer of Campfire, which I'm excited to get into in a little bit. And he's also an experienced map illustrator, which we're no strangers to in the world of fantasy. So Adam, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, it's our pleasure. You know, when we connected online, we were learning so much about you. And we were like, map illustrations. That's something we never kind of dove in and focused on before. So we're super excited to get into all that. But before we do that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and Digital Extremities as well?
Yeah, sure. So the short version is basically I am a UX and UI designer, and that has been my thing for a couple of years. But I've been writing for much longer than that. And Digital Extremities is a project that I began back in 2021-ish. I didn't really know what it was going to be when I first began. I just liked the idea of a cyberpunk setting, but stories taking place out in like rural and remote places. And so I kind of just followed that thread in a couple of different ways. And I really enjoy short story collections. So I think kind of by default, that's what it became. And it's actually out at time of recording right now. You can go and pick it up pretty much wherever you get ebooks. It's available in paperback, in Amazon, Barnes & Noble, BAM, a couple of different places. I actually just got it into a couple local bookstores, which I'm very excited about.
Nice.
I think I'm doing a signing next month. I'm not entirely sure. The person I was speaking to on the phone was also dealing with customers, and they were alone, so it happened very quickly. So wow. I have to touch base with them again. But yeah, it's been going really well. People have been very supportive of it. People who've read it have said very kind things about it. No 1-star reviews yet. Wow. We're going to hit that at some point, but so far we're doing good.
Hey, they're a fact of life, but there's always a couple. But as long as they're not flooding in, then you're doing something right. So congratulations on
like
that.
I said, so far everybody's been super kind, super interested in the setting. A few people have reached out to me saying like, I want more of this particular character or this story or this setting. And we'll see.
I mean, what I'm hearing, Adam, is that you have no 1-star reviews. And then, I mean, titans of the industry like George R.R. Martin, I mean, he probably has thousands,
it's
tens
true.
of thousands,
I am better than George
R.R.
Martin,
right? So, I mean, does that mean... I mean, we'll leave that to the listeners to decide.
No, it's true. I am better.
It seems to indicate you might be a better writer than George R. Martin.
Come over here. I got a deal for you.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, miniseries. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, miniseries, short story collection. Like we can make this.
So
work.
you're open to optioning then. That's good. That's good.
I know how optioning goes. I'll take the free money and go.
Yeah, you pay me, and then you maybe make it, maybe not. You pay me for the potential to make it. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. But we're also willing to tell the story of Friends Talking Fantasy via any sort of...
Our options are also for sale as well.
Art story.
As long as we're putting stuff out there.
Yeah, so HBO...
Our digital likenesses all up for sale. So absolutely.
Nothing is sacred.
Let's talk a little bit more about Digital Extremities, just so listeners know what to expect. I mean, in the synopsis, the collection's described as, quote, shining a spotlight on ordinary people in a callous yet hopeful future. So could you tell us some of the themes or messages that you hope readers are going to take away from these stories? Like, what are these stories about?
Sure. The stories kind of bounce around, but a few themes that come up a couple times are things like memory and the importance slash commodification of it in this
Mhm.
world. Family comes up a few times in different ways. Sometimes family is a problem, and sometimes family is the solution.
Mm.
Going into all these stories, I never was trying to uh, tell anyone like this thing is the correct way to approach whatever it is. Um, so often, if there's like one very strong point of view in one story, in a different story, there's kind of a contrasting point of view, or maybe maybe there's a result that goes a certain way, but there's kind of like a bittersweet element to that where it's like you got what you wanted, congratulations, but it didn't quite work the way that you expected, or the way that you got here was very difficult. Um,
Mm.
so it sort of is hard to describe the themes of these are 8 different stories that take place across like
Right.
80 years and aren't really connected in most ways, except for the fact that they all take place in the same world. But those were a couple of the things that sort of came up as I was writing it. Was like memory, family, and really trying to keep it so that there are these really bad things happening in the world, but also, there's these glimmers of hope. There's these moments of joy. There's these
Mm.
other things as well to sort of balance that out.
Yeah, I love that idea of callous yet hopeful. We've kind of talked about this before on our show, is this idea of like there's the big swing toward grimdark, and that
Mhm.
was what was most prominent for a while. And then it feels like the pendulum has kind of started to swing back and it's more toward the middle where a lot of the like focus is right now in
Oh yeah,
sci-fi
I
and
mean, like,
fantasy. Is this like callous but hopeful idea that you brought up? So a callous punk novel is exactly where I think we want to be these days.
yeah, I mean, I I respect grimdark, but it's not something that I particularly enjoy because it does get
Mhm.
so dark, obviously. But I also am not a huge fan of like the cozy genres where
Yeah.
everything is just kind of great. I know that's an extreme oversimplification, but
Mhm.
just like the whole, I don't know, just the structure of those don't appeal to me so well. But I really like the way of like merging them together in some way, which is sort of what I'm trying to do in some places here. Um, for example, there's one story in the collection, External Memory, in which there's a bunch of scenes where like the family is uh, gathered around like the kitchen table and they're just like making food together or kind of going through old memories of stuff. And like a lot of those scenes in particular were inspired by cozy fantasy and cozy
Mhm.
fiction. Like, what do moments like that look in this world, which I've had some readers describe as like dystopian? Um,
Yeah.
because I
Mhm.
don't think, I don't think you're ever in a situation where you totally lose uh, like all of one or the other. Like if things are going really well, there's still moments of doubt. And if things are going really badly, there's still moments where you get to sort of relax and be with people who you care about, or
Mhm.
do something that you enjoy or whatever it is. So really like trying to, I don't know, find a balance in there, like literally because the first couple stories that I wrote were very depressing. And so the
Mhm.
last couple were like, I need happy endings in here somewhere. And so
Right.
I sort of made sure to put a few in.
Hmm.
But yeah.
Mm.
Was it challenging to find that balance of like, I don't want to just, I want to connect and I want to have that impact, but I just don't want to be a bummer. How do you find that
Yeah.
balance? Was that a
I mean,
challenge?
I am usually a bummer, so it was extremely difficult. Um,
Right.
but it became easier as the collection went on because I was able to look back at what I had written and what the stories had been about, and I was able to sort of say, okay, I want to take this thing in a different direction in this story, or I haven't touched on like at one point. Um, I realized I had a Cyberpunk story collection, and not one of them had discussed the internet, the net, the like whatever cyberspace you want to call it.
Mm.
And so I wrote a story that like specifically revolved around a problem dealing with somebody going into the net.
Mm.
And sort of as I guess the blanks began to get filled in and there were fewer of them left over, I was able to fill those easier.
No, that's really interesting, and it's like the cyberpunk elements like hitting some of those beats.
Mhm.
Were there other inspirations you were drawing from? Like, what inspired you to pursue that route and then kind of frame your short story collection around it?
Well, I mean, in general, just I was at the time this all began, I was very interested in cyberpunk as a genre. I
Mm.
had been playing Cyberpunk 2077, and I had just finished Neuromancer, and I had been getting really into TR Napper's work as well.
Mm.
And so, just like, I was just kind of getting a lot of that at the time.
Mm.
And that's where the cyberpunk stuff comes in from. But I have a background in a lot of like literary fiction. Like one of my biggest inspirations that wasn't cyberpunk was stuff by Edwidge Jantika, who is a short story. Well, she does a lot of stuff, but the things that I've read from her mostly are short stories. Um, for example, I've actually got one
Mm.
here. The Dewbreaker, which is a
Okay.
collection of short stories that kind of progress through time, and you see the most recent stories first. And so it's this daughter and her father going off to like sell her first art piece to somebody. And then the next story is her father's point of view from like the 90s. And then the next one is her mother's point of view from a few years before that. And you can kind of see how like you go backwards through time and you sort of see the people that this family have interacted with in different ways. Some of them were good interactions, some of them were very bad interactions. And then the
Mm.
final story is this like long novelette where you see how they meet under extreme circumstances. And it's extremely good. Like that's the
Wow.
whole collection is just like living rent free in my head. But yeah, so like that's sort of where a lot of this comes from, where it's like I love sci-fi, I love fantasy, but I also
Mhm.
have like this little bit of a background in literary fiction, and I really love the way that they handle um, these sometimes very mundane problems, but make it so personal to that character and make that character so detailed that it really just like it stands out to me.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm wondering, have you been gotten the chance to read Stories of Your Life and Others by Ted
I
Chiang?
have,
Or
yeah. I read that a few years
yeah,
ago.
yeah.
Actually, I actually forgot that I did this, but I named a character in my first story in Digital Extremities after a character who is in of Your Life and Others. I
Wow.
only realized that like a few months ago when I was going back and like writing up some like behind the scenes thoughts on each of the stories, and I realized like, wait a second.
Yeah, as you're
Hmm.
talking, that was kind of what was on my mind. Sounds
Mhm.
like those kind of vibes resonate in your writing too. And for those listening, that Stories of Your Life, that's the basis of that movie Arrival, which is
One of the
freaking
stories,
amazing. Yeah.
specifically Stories of Your Life and Others,
Yeah.
is the basis of Arrival. And then in that collection, there's like 7 or 8 others that are
Yeah.
also very good.
Yeah, totally agree. So, highly recommend that. Once you get done with Digital Extremities, then you can go read Stories of Your Life to all our
Mhm.
listeners out there. So, um, yeah, I'm curious to hear more, Adam, about your journey of self-publishing, and what it was like for you.
Yeah. Um, so I have some experience with hybrid publishing. I went through a hybrid publisher for my first book like 8-ish years ago. Um, with this one, I wanted to go on my own just because I know more about the industry now. Working with Campfire, especially, we work with indie authors all the time.
Hmm.
We've even published a couple of books ourselves. And so, and just like in designing our new reading like platform and the way that you upload EPUBs and stuff into that now, like I've had to learn how to do all that as well. And so back then, looking for a publisher was very much a crutch for I don't know how to do anything else. Whereas now I do, and I also was looking for for a quicker timeline, basically, because I know how slow publishing can move, and there's no guarantee of if something gets out. But I felt like I just needed to put something new out there and see what happened, and we would kind of make decisions based on that moving forward. So that's why I chose to self-publish this collection and probably the next couple of things. But I'm definitely interested in going back to traditional publishing probably in the future at some point. If there's a project, I've got a novel on the back burner that I would like to get to at some point, but I keep having to fix it over and over and over again. So we will see if that ever sees the light of day.
Right. That's a common problem. When we talk to writers, there's some that they just want to lock away forever. Some they've been writing over and over. So we can understand your pain there. So what's the experience been like with Digital Extremities? It's been a relatively recent release. How is the self-promotion coming along?
Well, it's been a real mixed bag. But overall, I think it's gone better than I expected. Because I went in with very low expectations. I didn't want to get myself excited about, anything happening, because realistically speaking, I'm sure most people listening have no idea who I am. I've never heard my name. They probably haven't heard anything I've worked on before. And that is a really hard place to start from. It's difficult to get people's ear. I spoke with a literary agent this summer and shared some of my work, and she kind of handed it back to me and was like, "This is all really well put together. What do you need advice for?" And I was like, "The one thing I'm really concerned about that I don't know really how to do, and I don't know where to even begin, is with marketing." And I realize a literary agent is not a marketer, but they're in the business every day. They're in that trad space every day. And her advice was essentially, have you heard of TikTok? And at that point, I was
that was Charles's advice for me during our last.
No, that's what everyone says. I feel like that's what you say when you don't know what to do. Especially if you love or are not at all familiar with TikTok. Those are the two groups. So kind of hearing that was almost like permission to just not worry about it. Because if if the people who do this every day, who work with authors all the time, if they don't have anything better to say, then we're just gonna see what happens. And that doesn't mean I'm gonna not try. It means I'm going to be careful about how I use my time. So being I have a lot of experience with static graphics and artwork and stuff like that. It's very easy for me to put together a bunch of graphics very quickly. If you go to my Instagram page, you'll see it's a lot of similar stuff if you go through the homepage feed for the most part. And that's because I'm able to put those out pretty quickly, and they all look a little bit different, and there's always different content and stuff. But it's I'm not going to spend hours and hours on video work, for example, because I just don't have experience with that, and I don't want to take the time to learn it right now. Even if the TikTok or the YouTube concepts are probably a good thing in the long run, I don't know that right now it makes sense.
There's so much more work. That's the problem we've always had. That's why we're that's why we're on Twitter and doing a podcast. And it's well, we would love to do segue all of that to YouTube and
Yeah.
TikTok and leave Twitter behind. But it's one of those things where it's like, who's gonna take the footage and make something? You know,
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
a lot
And
of time.
even what you guys already do, because I've done it
Mhm,
before in the past a little bit too. What you already do with audio editing and
mhm.
distributing that is already pretty time consuming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's almost at this point just like trying to assess what is going to be the least amount of time for the most effect. And at the moment,
Hmm.
considering I already have some ability to do static graphics, I'm doing that across a couple platforms. And I'm reaching out to folks like yourself,
Mhm,
talking to people on podcasts and their YouTube live shows, and
mhm,
talking to, just whoever is basically willing to have me, regardless of their audience size,
mhm.
because if one person from their audience finds my book and they enjoy it, that's one person I didn't have before. And it costs
Right.
me, what, half an hour, an hour?
Mhm, mhm.
Um, so, trying to like arrange some signings here and there at local bookstores. So, like I said, I'm not going to, um, not try at this, but I'm
Right.
also not going to stress out about numbers. I'm not going to stress out
Yeah.
about how many sales
Yeah.
I'm making. I'm going to just keep doing my thing because it's time efficient, and I'm going to continue working on the next books.
Right. And I think that's a great attitude to have in when you're self-publishing and just from
Hmm.
speak to indie authors all the time. It's like the nature of self-publishing is that you don't have the resources and the distribution that
Yeah.
a publishing house would have. And I think you said it exactly right. It's like you have to make the most of the time that you're going to give it. And, if it's not well spent making TikTok videos. It's better spent going and doing book signings and interviews. I think that's a smart mindset to have. It's like time is one of the resources you have to manage.
Yeah, yeah. And trying to decide when is the best time to do a lot of those things. Like I'm really excited about a couple of events next year that I would like to go to, but I also don't want to go to them too soon because I don't want to show up with one book.
Mhm.
I've got a couple
Mm.
of things, like I said, in the works already. In theory, if everything goes according to plan, and there's no major setbacks, which I don't think at this point there will be, but we will see. Um, I could potentially show up at like Dragonsteel next year with 3 books. Um, that
Nice.
is not a manageable pace for a long period, but I think it's possible for this. And
Mm.
that would probably be a good time to show up because it's not just, indie debut-ish author. Um, it's, if you don't like this, I have this other thing, I have this other thing.
Mhm.
Part of the plan is to have this fiction stuff for readers, and then we've already touched on map design. I want to do a book
Hmm.
all about that as well for authors and
Mm.
have something for everybody. And, read this thing for fun, read this thing if you want to improve your world building, your map design, all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
So that's kind of like the long term plan. And a lot of what I'm doing right now is kind of focused on building that up and seeing where that goes. And that's kind of why I'm leaving my options open in the future for like trad publishing is like I don't know what happens after those next couple books. I don't
Right.
know what my audience looks like. I don't know if I have an audience in the first place.
Right.
Maybe this is just like a fun thing that I do for a few months and then it peters out and who knows what happens then. But we're gonna give it a shot.
Yeah, I mean, with all the things that you're doing, I think that it's extremely impressive. You are thinking you're gonna, and sounds like you will, be able to get 3 books done in time for Dragonsdale
It
next year.
helps
So
that
I'm
they're
excited to see what
relatively
comes
short.
next. I mean,
Um,
yeah, go
And
ahead.
any regardless
It's
of
like
length, releasing a book is a
exactly.
huge
yeah.
accomplishment.
No,
So
Yeah.
I'm not discounting that. I'm just
yeah,
saying
yeah.
there's no way this would be
You've got a
possible if they
plan.
were longer.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, like
amazing
right.
it's possible as it is. So
Yeah,
just
like
props to you. And among the other things you do, you did mention uh, map design, which Charles and I, that was one of the things that really piqued our interest about all the work that you're doing because we're like, never really talked in depth about map design here, let alone with an expert like yourself. So, yeah, can you tell us a little bit about your work as a map illustrator?
Yeah, I mean, I've just always enjoyed making maps. It's always been kind of part of my writing process as well. I like to know what the place I'm writing in looks like. And so, very often when I start working on a book, I will, within like the first month of working on that, for the most part, I start working on a map and I will not stop working on that map until it's done. um, but I started working on it for other people, probably like, I don't know, in the mid tens, when a couple friends of mine started asking me about commissions, and I was extremely unprepared. But we did it anyway, and I kind of realized, like, people actually are looking for this. They want me to do this for some reason. And one thing led to another, and now I have I have usually a couple of commissions per year. I can't do too many because I just don't have time for it. But right now I'm working on one for somebody I know, and it's part of like a larger world that we did actually, like I think in like 2021 I did like the world map for him, and every now and then he shows back up and he's like, hey, I want one of like a close up of this part. So yeah, it's super fun. I like to work on it's a really specific style, but I love the maps from like the Age of Exploration, where everything is being surveyed still and we don't have a clear picture of everything. And it's like, kind of sketchy a little bit. And right. Yeah, it's very fun for me.
No, that's interesting. And like this whole world, the process of creating a map illustration for a series. I'm kind of curious about your beginning process for when you get a commission. Like, how do you kick off that what is your process?
Well, first off, I usually ask about a few details just to kind of make sure that we're aligned on what the goal is. So, like, is this a map for your book? Is it like for a piece of paper you're just going to put on a piece of paper that you give away or sell, or for your own personal use? What size is that going to be? What color is that going to be, or black and white? And then a little bit about the world too, like what time period approximately does this equate to on Earth, or is it in the future? What are some of the things that we need to talk about? And like, do you have a sketch of the map? A sketch is always extremely helpful. Like for that world map I mentioned, the author drafted it up on like 11 pieces of paper, taped them all together, and then sent it to me across like 3 pictures that they took of the map on their floor. But that was extremely useful for me because, at a peninsula in the north means a whole lot less to me than if I can see where they want it to be. And I'm happy to change stuff along the way and like make it look a little more realistic. I'm always very open with authors about that. I can do that if they want. And what are some of like the inspirations I should be considering if I go through those steps? Like, I did a map for The Ascendature by Robin Dabney, and she kind of sent me a very simple sketch with very linear coastlines, and it was very like straight up and down the page, like page-sized map. Like it didn't quite look. It looked like it belonged in the book, not like the book was showing you a part of a larger world, if that makes sense. Okay. And so one of the things that I talked about with her was like, are you comfortable if I make a couple of like small changes so long as they don't affect things that would impact the story? And so we like shifted the landmass a little bit to make it look a little more like off kilter, a little bit less page sized. I drastically changed like all the coastlines. She said that she gave me like a couple of inspirations of the different cultures and the land masses and stuff like that. And so I looked at what those places looked like on Earth and kind of used that as an inspiration. So like one of her inspirations for the book was Pacific Northwest and all those like rocky shores and mountain and islands and stuff like that. And so there's a whole bunch of like extra stuff that I added in that map, which was not in the original draft.
Yeah.
But just like made sense for that kind of coastline for it to look good.
Interesting. Yeah, and I actually pulled up, I think I got it, the standard map of Galvaith, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
I'm
So
really
looking
looking
it.
at the same thing
We
over
did,
here.
Very detailed. No, I mean, this is a ton
it's
of
impressive.
work. Yeah, it's very
Yeah, no,
impressive.
that was a super fun one too. That particular map has a section in the middle called Miter's Waste, and I thought it was like a river in the sketch that I was given, and so I was asking Robin about what it like what it was, because it didn't make sense for it to be a river and also for it to be like splitting the continent in two. She was like, "Oh yeah, that's where a giant like monster just rampaged through the continent and tore it in half, and now they have like these dams preventing water from getting in." And so as I was like, she just drew the line through the continent, but when I was going through it, I'm like, how can we make this more interesting? And so like as I was drawing it out, I was imagining like, where would this creature have like grabbed different parts of the land and like torn it apart? And so like if you look, there's sort of like this S curve throughout it where you can sort of see its body might have been thrashing and like these different air quotes claw marks.
I mean, this is I just want to direct folks over to Adam C. Bassett, 2S's2T's.com. That is a really impressive. I mean, it's like as you're talking about it, it's kind of putting me in touch with this idea, like how much a map can tell a narrative in itself. And of course, there's certain things you wouldn't be able to know exactly that story about, like, oh, a monster rampage, but it does the shading and the shape of it instantly is, and it's in the center of the map. So instantly you're drawn to that and you're like, what happened there? And it builds those questions and that intrigue that authors are always trying to raise early on in their story. It gives you the chance where you haven't even flipped to the first like actual word of text yet, and you're already like, what is going on with this world? This is interesting. I want to find out more.
I've seen a lot of that happen lately through like annotations on a map, where the characters in the book have like written on the map about the things that they like on it, or like, you know, points that matter to them, or questions that they're asking another character. But I think it's also really important to consider sort of like the origin of the different things that you're illustrating. You know, the mountains can just be mountains, but in a fantasy world, you legitimately have to ask, like, how were these made? Was it like natural geologic forces, or did like a god die there and they turned into the mountains? Like, I don't know.
No, it's
open to, go ahead, Charles.
No, I was just going to say a lot of times in fantasy novels, you have political riffs and things like that. And a lot of that can be based on the geography of the land, whether it's, you know, this is where the mountain ridge is, and that's the political divide, or, you know, I'm sure that this line drawn across the middle of this continent here will have some implication in the people that live on either side of it, right? You can start to kind of frame that narrative. So it's important that as you're trekking that journey, that it translates to the map design as well. It's kind of fun to look at that. And I had another question, Adam, just because this is so rare, we get to pick the brain of a fantasy map aficionado here. I was wondering, like, what are some of your like go-to classic, like greatest fantasy maps of all time? Are there any recommendations that come to mind for you?
I think, I mean, the one that probably got me into just loving fictional maps is probably the Game of Thrones map, like the original ones in the books. I think that was the first time, like, I'd seen maps in books before, but that was the first time where like all of the locations felt like they mattered. And like, even if we didn't get them to to them in this book, we would later. And that was kind of I would say probably the beginning of when I started really enjoying them. I also love the maps that Isaac Stewart made for Brian McClellan's first series, the Powder Mage trilogy.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, those are good.
Yeah, there's a point at the end. So in the original map, there's this mountain, Crescem Kurga, and at the end of that book, something happens there. I won't say what in case of spoilers. Book's been out for a while, but anyway, something happens there, and part of the mountain basically explodes. Book 2 comes around, and the map in that, and in book 3, that mountain is partly destroyed, and you can see on the map the kind of rubble that's fallen apart from it. That was also another really formative moment for me too, where it's like, over the series, if something has changed the world in a significant way, like let's show that on the map, and let's change the maps depending on what we're talking about. Kind of talking about Robin Dabney again, I illustrated maps for her sequel earlier this year, and they aren't something that I can share yet, but they are some of my favorite ones that I've worked on, because like we totally changed the kind of map that we're doing. It's not just like a top-down like general map of the world. There's a point at which in the story they spend a lot of time on this mountain, and so we changed it up a little bit and did something kind of like a trail map of the path up the mountain, and you see like the different camps along the way and stuff like that. Really like inspired by maps of like Everest and like these really cool like mountain passes, which was a totally like new style for me, but it was super fun to work on. And it's also kind of showing like, you know, you don't have to just have this general map of, you know, points of like where the cities are and stuff. You can also do like road maps or elevation maps, or you know, I think if you're doing a pirate story, it'd be really cool to have nautical charts. Like that's a different way of looking at the world.
Right. No, that's well said. Those are some great recs, by the way. They're some of my favorites as well. And I see more
I also
now.
want to. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah,
I'm
no,
also
go
just
ahead,
remembering
please.
your question. I got topic there. The Last Spy Hunter as well by Saloni Goldenberg.
Oh yeah.
That I spoke with her. Actually, she's going to have a few quotes in this book that I'm working on about map design. And I spoke with her about how she made that map, because she made it. And if I'm remembering right, it was like a whole watercolor process that she then scanned into Photoshop to like make a little more legible with like the labels and stuff. But like I don't think that the version in the map fully captures this, or the version in the book fully captures this. But if you see like the original one that she made, it's stunning, and it's the whole point of that process is like to make it look like it's from this world. It's not just, you know, points on a map that you digitally put together. But yeah, that was another one that just like the whole process of it was really fascinating to me.
Interesting. Yeah, to start with a watercolor, that's interesting. Yeah, that whole book is gorgeous.
Yeah,
Covers
we
and
had
everything.
Sal on for an interview probably a few months back at this point.
Around the release of the book, yeah.
She didn't even mention that. She's so modest, and with so many other things, she's also got a million different things going on between.
I guess you're just gonna have to have her back on.
We might have to.
Well, I kept telling her when was Elder Scrolls was going to come out. She wouldn't tell me, but you know, she knows. But so I wanted to segue into Campfire, which we had mentioned earlier, and it was something I hadn't heard of until we connected. You work as a UX UI designer for Campfire, and I'm curious to know more about what Campfire is and its role in the, you know, greater literary world and your role there.
Yeah, so Campfire is a lot of things. It's yeah. So on
Hmm.
one side, it is a writing platform. That's what it began as. So you can come to Campfire and you can write your book, you can edit your book, you can work on the world building and organize all the like the notes you have about the setting if you want. You can build timelines and use that. Half of the people use it for structuring their novel, half of the people use it for structuring like the history of their world. It's very flexible. Um, so that is kind of like the writer side of it, and you can use any mixture of those things as you want. So if you like where you're currently writing and you just need a place to organize your notes, you can just do that. If you are like me and you don't write any notes down because you're gonna hate yourself later, you can do that too. um, and the other side of it is our reading platform, which is fairly new. It kind of fully launched this year, um, and so now you can go and get the Campfire reading app on your Apple and Android devices, and you can go read books there from people who are publishing on Campfire. Some of those books were written on Campfire, some of them were not. We've got folks like Olivia Atwater and E.L. Lyons and a whole bunch of like cozy stuff if you're into that. We've got some special projects in the works right now as well.
I see Digital Extremities as a staff pick. It's corruption at the highest level.
I did not do that. um, but
That's funny. Hey, I don't blame you at all. Like, I think that's cool. So
hey,
it's open to anyone basically who
yes.
wants to dabble in writing and help them get organized.
Yeah. The whole writing side is there's like a free trial you can go give a shot if you want to see what it's like. There's no locked features behind any paywalls. We just sort of lock down how many of each thing that you can make. Um, but to publish, there is no fee or anything. It's very similar to something like Barnes and Noble or Amazon, where you just go publish your EPUB. And if you want to share extra stuff, you can do that too. You can share, character profiles and location details, art, whatever you would like to share through Campfire's elements as well. So some of those tools I was talking about earlier, you can then like export them into the reader as well. So as a reader reading on Campfire, you can read the full novel, and then like as you're reading it, you might unlock access to this character profile or this map, or I've got a friend publishing on Campfire who's going to have a whole fictional calendar that they're going to share, and so you can get really in the weeds if you want, and as a reader, you just kind of get more stuff to go and check out.
It's
Interesting.
almost like expand it. I mean, it kind of reminds me of maps in some way where it's just like expanding beyond just
Yeah.
the typical written word and making this a more complex experience. And it sounds like when you talk about unlocking things, it's almost got this like gamified aspect
A
to it
little
that
bit,
we're not
yeah.
used to with reading.
A little bit, yeah. So as you read through the book, the author can set, at this chapter, reveal these characters or this map
Hmm.
or this event or whatever they want to do. And that's all up to the author. Like sometimes that won't exist at all. Sometimes it'll be at every
Yeah.
single chapter. Sometimes it'll just be every couple. But that's a really cool way for authors to say, like, I want to give you this extra stuff, but I don't want you to see it too soon.
Yeah.
So if I like lock it behind chapter 3 when this character shows up, then I'm going to make sure that you don't see it until you actually meet the character. So it's just a really fun way to sort of reward readers for getting through the book, and to also, as for the authors, give them access to comfortably share stuff with basically spoilers.
I can't think of any other way. Like, of course, it might be like an author would typically maybe have like character profiles or other things like that
Mm-hmm.
available on their website or whatever. but the idea of being able to unlock them in sequence in a way that
Yeah.
actually aligns with where you're at in the book instead of just being like, I'm not going anywhere until I'm done with this book because I don't want anything spoiled. Like it adds this extra really unique aspect. I can't think of any other place where something like that is available. So that's really cool. And of
Yeah,
course
the author has
there
full
might be
control over all
yeah.
that, so it's like really easy for them to say like this thing has no spoilers, so I can just show it to you,
Mhm.
or I have to make this wait. I have to make you wait until the end of the book for this one, or somewhere in the middle. So yeah,
Yeah, and there might be just a teensy bit of overlap between readers and gamers.
what?
So of course, I've heard anyway, but yes, it's those of us who game a lot as well will probably enjoy the kind of like new perk unlocked feeling
Yeah,
uh to moving through a book. So that's so cool.
yeah, it's super fun. I did not have a lot of faith in it when the concept was first brought up to me and when I was working on it even, but then I started to talk to
Mm,
different authors in our community about it because whenever I get a chance, I like to speak with people who are actually like using our product every day and who are publishing books and stuff. And I talked to them about it, and every single person I spoke to was so excited. And I was like, "All right, I'm all in. Let's go."
mm.
No, that's really interesting. Yeah, and I see you've gotten like some really interesting like community stuff as well, and you've got a blog going and
Yep.
like some really interesting just approach to writing that I'm not a writer myself, but to have spoken to a lot of writers and to see the community, yeah, I think that's a really cool aspect of it.
Yeah, our blog is very focused toward like author interviews and advice for writers and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I've actually personally done interviews for at this point over 80 people for Campfire, which is
Wow.
wild.
Wow.
I just realized that the other day. uh, but yeah, I mean that's been a really fun resource to work on and develop over time. But yeah, this is why I kind of preface with saying Campfire is a lot of things because we have the
Mhm.
writer's side, we have this blog where all the resources are, and then we have the reader's side where you can go and like read everybody's books and stuff.
Yeah. No, it's very cool. And yeah, is that the goal for Campfire ultimately, like to have this all-in-one community sci-fi fantasy, like from writing to publishing? Like, is that the goal of it? Is that where it's heading to? Like, what is the ultimate, like, what's next for Campfire?
I think at the moment we're kind of at the end goal for the most part
Hmm.
is like you're describing to have this all-in-one writer tool and have that connect with the publishing and reading side and trying to make that at this point the challenge is trying to make that as easy as possible for new people to join up on and
Hmm.
to attract people.
Hmm.
I mean, people are so. This has been the biggest challenge we've had right now. People are so set in, usually Amazon, but also like Kobo is really big, and there's all these other platforms that they're kind of used to that. And
Hmm.
so it's been challenging to bring new people in to a new ecosystem, which so far, like we've got a few hundred books at this point, which obviously doesn't hold a candle to what a lot of these other platforms have.
Hmm.
We are trying to, uh, you know, stir some of that up a little bit. Right now, we're working on some special edition books, which have a bunch of unique artwork and behind the scenes stuff. Like right now, on the 8th of October, we are going to release the World of Tea Princess Chronicles, which is written by and with Casey Blair, the original author of the Tea Princess Chronicles. This is like the world guide for it. And you see character art for all of the characters in these stories. You get access to all of our short fiction related to it. There's more stuff coming up later as well. I don't think we've
Hmm.
announced that, so I'm not sure I'm allowed to say it. But we
Okay.
have another
Mm.
cozy fantasy author who's going to be working with us. We have a
Great.
grimdark person who's coming in to work with us and is going to be releasing the entire series on Campfire. Um, so yeah, like there's big stuff coming down the line,
Great.
and that is part of a larger effort of like bringing people into that reading platform. And of course, along the way, as we improve the reading platform, the writing platform benefits as well, because if we're updating like, I don't know, the like magic systems module to make it more fun for readers to go through, we also need to make sure that authors can set up those new tools. And
Mhm.
so, there's stuff coming down the pipeline that's going to kind of try to lift everybody up.
Oh, that's really exciting. Yeah, it seems like this, the more adoption you can have and the more people you can get involved,
Hmm.
the richer the content, like the environment has been made and just nurturing it, you know. So that's really interesting and admirable to be, you know, competing with the likes of Amazon. I can respect that. And, you know, even like I remember listening to like Brandon Sanderson lament about like his negotiations with Amazon and just
Yeah.
like how dependent like indie authors can be to that environment as well. So it affects the whole range. So to have an environment that's just more supportive and less like pure volume play of like just hey, rank on this page is
Yeah,
it
yeah.
it seems like a future I would want to be a part of, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Amazon's tricky. Like this whole thing is tricky because readers prefer to have everything in one place.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Understandably so. Like if there was, one place I could get all my books and it was perfect and, didn't shortchange authors in any way, that would be lovely.
Mhm.
Um, but that doesn't really exist right now. And we're trying
No.
to do something a little bit unique with these like chapter unlocks where you can, again, up to the author, but they can set up stuff for readers to come and see extra beyond the book. And on top of
Huh.
that, we are giving authors 80% royalties for all this stuff that they're selling, and trying to like really enable them to just focus on writing more and
Mhm.
be the place where um, they're being supported. Even if our current readership, our current audience is still fairly small. I mean, the more books who come in, the easier our audience grows because there's more for them to enjoy, which means more
Sure.
people can come in. It's a real chicken and egg problem.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Well, Campfire's coming for you, Bezos. So watch your back.
Yeah,
Take that,
that's
Jeffrey.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're coming. Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I ditched my Kindle a long time ago because it was just like the experience was not good and it was getting ads and then they started adding DRM so I couldn't even read it on other devices and it was just turning into this whole fiasco. So I'm a Kobo guy now, but it's things like this is exactly where I would, you know, love to be because we're highlighting
Mm,
notes, we're engaging with the community all the time. So
yeah.
it seems like a, you know, the perfect solution and it's just like I don't need my Kindle where I don't own anything I'm paying for and I'm getting ads on top of it. So it's like I've spent hundreds of dollars on stuff that
Yeah, for sure.
ultimately nothing. I get nothing at the end of the day. It's crazy how they did that. So anyway, I mean, Adam, this has been really interesting, insightful. Appreciate you coming in and sharing all of these different facets of the self-publishing world and your experiences and map making and Campfire. It's been really enlightening. So thank you for that. I wanted to make sure, is there, you know, as we start to close out our conversation, is there anything else we need to know? Where can listeners find more information about you and Digital Extremities and your work at Campfire? How can they support you?
Right now, if you want to go to my website, adamcbassett.com, there's a newsletter linked there. You can go subscribe. Anything important, new, uh, is going to be kind of shared mostly through there. That's probably the easiest way to keep in touch, just because the algorithms these days don't necessarily show you
Mm,
who you're following.
yes.
Uh, and but of course, you can also follow me the same handle, Adam C. Bassett. But yeah, I would subscribe there if you would like to keep up with news about the new release, stuff coming out in the future, any like major events that I do that are not like local to my immediate area, small things. Like if I do get a chance to go to some of these bigger ones, I will talk about it there.
Hmm.
I've also got a Discord, which I don't think is linked there, but I can put it up or I can give it to you guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's probably the best way to keep in touch. Or
Awesome.
yeah.
No, I just subscribed, so we are part of the newsletter now. So we won't
Awesome,
be
thank
missing
you.
anything. Yeah, of course. And I verified it and everything. Very thorough. I like that.
Wow, that's fast.
Hey, it's no joke, guys. But no, that's fantastic, guys. Check out Digital Extremities. Check out the newsletter. Stay in touch. Send all your map related questions, and we'll have links and all of that. But Adam, thank you so much for your time and for coming on the show and for lending your thoughts and your expertise on this. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me so much. It's been a fun time.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. We really appreciate it. Adam, thanks again for coming on. Thank you all. And as always, go forth and conquer, friends.